I hope that these 2 hours that we just spent on Nestlé Health Science provide greater depth and understanding in what we do at Nestlé Health Science. But let me just summarize for you and wrap up. First of all, we are making great progress to creating a leading company in nutrition and health. We're focusing on 3 strategic imperatives to deliver. First of all, boosting growth in our core. This is establishing opportunities, driving distribution, geographic expansion, driving category leadership with our brands, and building great customer partnerships. Second, driving differentiation with great expertise. You saw some of the fantastic innovation that we have, expanding that throughout our portfolio, building ecosystem. And then third, continuously unlocking opportunities through M&A and portfolio management. That's about delivering our synergies and M&A acquisitions plans, but also creating future additional opportunities with bolt-ons. That means overall driving long-term value by continuously through 2025, driving high single-digit growth rate, and also driving our bottom line with more than 400 basis point improvement, driving our underlying trading operating profit above 18%. So as you leave today, here's what I'd like you to remember and take away. We're operating in a fantastic, attractive category with great trends that are here to stay for the long term. We have a portfolio which has and delivers great benefit in nutrition and metabolism with fantastic expertise. We have a unique scale and now have created that scale to drive further our leadership with great talent and great brands. And last but not least, we have a model where we can create significant synergies between consumer care and medical nutrition to drive efficiency in top and bottom line. With that, I'll stop here, and Anna and Don will join me here on stage, and we'll take your questions. Thank you.
So we now do the Q&A session. As you did this morning, if you could please raise your hands to ask a question. And you know the routine, give your name and company name and limit yourself to no more than 2 questions, please. Guillaume, please kick us off.
Good afternoon. It's Guillaume Delmas from UBS. 2 questions for me, please. The first one is on the VMS category. We've been hearing from many of your competitors that the category has slowed, but they think it's not just down to a post-COVID-19 normalization. They also see some element of consumers just trading out of the category because it's viewed as more discretionary. So would like to hear your view on how defensive and resilient the category is in a recessionary environment. And related to that, a point of clarification, Greg, you were talking about a return to high single-digit growth from the second half of 2023 in your presentation? Okay. And then the second question is about your portfolio today. Where are the gaps from a regional or subcategory standpoint? Where do you see the most obvious gaps? And for the time being, are you going to be focusing on integrating the recently acquired businesses and extracting the synergies, or could you already add some more businesses? Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much. I let Don start in terms of the VMS category and recession.
Yeah, I think if you looked historically, the category has proven to be very insulated from downturn as a result of recession. So you look back at 2008, you actually saw continued growth on the category in conjunction with the economic environment. I also think, and we've seen, that there's continues to be passion and commitment towards wellness and health, and sometimes that's even more impassioned as a result of other issues going on around people. So we're not seeing that. Certainly we're cycling COVID, and we have some significant, as I said earlier, bumps from year ago, in terms of volume created by Omicron and Delta variants, et cetera. And we're definitely seeing immunity taking a little bit of a year-on-year comp decline, but not tied directly to the recession.
And To add to, so for your second question in terms of opportunities, I mean, obviously, as you heard us through the presentation, it's still a very fragmented market, which offers a tremendous amount of opportunities for growth. We believe that we have a great portfolio that we have built now, establishing that great leadership position where we can build on. Frankly, there is nobody that has our scale in terms of brand, in terms of manufacturing, R&D. And I think that's the starting point, which allows us to expand distribution and geographically, I think. So that's the starting point where we're coming from. I think we continuously look at opportunities. We are diligent when we look at those opportunities. There are a few special technology, specific categories where we think we can build. As you will remember the slide where I showed you some of the segments where we're not necessarily yet leaders in the market. And this would lead to potential additional opportunities to continue to build on those segments. And geographically, you saw that we're very exposed or leading in the US market, and hence there are plenty of opportunities for us to grow and build further geographically. So that's where our focus is, but there are many opportunities on the market. We're disciplined in how we look at them, and it has to make sense in terms of the trends, in terms of the strategic fit, but also in terms of the financial performance that we expect.
Bruno, please go ahead.
Bruno Montaigne from Bernstein. Greg, if I understood correctly, you're aiming to grow high single digit, so I'll make that 8-9. On the market growth slide, most of the markets were between 4 and 6%, so I'll make that 5. So you're aiming to outgrow the markets by 300 to 400 basis points pretty consistently. If I also understood correctly, it's mainly about either white space filling in, geographic expansion, probably market share gains. Am I missing anything? Because clearly M&A wasn't part of it, and would you be able to sort of size, is it mainly geographic expansion, mainly market share expansion? Could you sort of weigh up those two things? And my second question is, in consumer health, obviously we have one of your competitors, Haleon, that had like this Zantac problem with medical liability. Do you feel you have any exposure to this kind of issues? And if so, do you make enough excessive returns or excess returns to pay for that potential risk in your portfolio?
All right. So starting with your first question, thank you, Bruno. In terms of the growth equation, I think you got it right, meaning that we intend to grow above market, 200 to 400 basis points. This is what we are shooting for. You saw that we've been doing even better than this during the COVID period, but in a steady state environment, I think we can outperform the market. And it's driven through share gain, absolutely, and we think that we have the momentum, the capacity to deliver on the share gain as well as geographic expansion. But also I think penetration is also a great opportunity for growth in terms of when you see the VMS level penetration or active nutrition. We see that we see that we can create more momentum in the market in general to increase the penetration of the segment outside the US. And the same applies to medical nutrition. I think in medical nutrition, the category is still under-indexed versus its potential and can grow further. And being a leader in both areas, we think that we can create the momentum for additional growth. On your second question, I'm blanking now.
Whether you have any risk,
yes.
risk on the side.
Yeah. So, and please don't chime in as this is a more of a U.S. case, but Zantac is an OTC product. So I don't think the categories where we play in carry the same level of risk, hence we take a lot of very serious, deep review with our medical, regulatory, clinical and legal review on the claims and the product that we have And so we have the proper level of reserve for any potential challenges, but we haven't seen in this category any significant legal challenges.
Yeah, no, I would concur. I think, sorry.
And just to follow up on your first point, if you're going to boost penetration, does that mean you're planning to accelerate the market's growth? Because if penetration grows.
Well, so I think, you know, as when we look at the US market, which is quite highly penetrated, US is growing at 2-3% growth rate. Geographically, we see more 6-7-ish growth rate. So obviously, that's part of the equation in the mid-single digit growth rate that we mentioned across the board.
Thank you.
John, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. John Ennis from Goldman. I've got a couple of questions on the margin guidance. So it looks like 3/4 of the margin expansion that you're forecasting over the next 3 years are coming from effectively cost savings and efficiencies. And then at the same time, you want to accelerate the top line growth. So I guess the question is, how confident are you that you can deliver on both? Because sometimes there's a trade-off between those two components. And then the second part of the question links to some of the earlier points, but from the outside looking in, this is a category with relatively low concentration and also low margin. There appears to be, again, a correlation there. So to what degree can you sustainably improve the margin without the need for further consolidation in that industry? And maybe to help answer that question, could you give us a bit of a steer on the gross margin structure of this business unit? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll start with the second part because that's what I can remember now. Anyway, so in terms of the growth margin and bottom line, in general, it's a category where we play that enjoys more attractive margin than you would find in food and beverage, more specialized, higher gross margin in general. And as I mentioned, we are in an investment mode either for our growth and share gain in the US and internationally, but also through M&A that comes with one-offs when we make the acquisition and also investment to create the synergies. So as we cycle through this, we believe that we can continuously enjoy gross margin improvement through the synergies, through the efficiency that we're building, and also drive further efficiency all the way to the bottom line, hence driving improvement in our underlying trading operating profit. And someone needs to remind me the first question.
The synergy component.
Sorry?
The synergy component of the margin.
Yeah, I mean, you've kind of touched on it, but it was effectively, you know, to what degree you can deliver both such a high degree of margin expansion with an acceleration in growth, because I think one element of the efficiencies that you mentioned was a reduction or efficiency in marketing spend.
Yeah, and again, I think it comes to what I just said. We're driving size. It also definitely helping on continuous improvement in our margin. You know, the geographic expansion, we're not starting from scratch in every market. And every time we launch, we have now of a more established footprint. We can drive this in-sourcing of manufacturing. All this, when you add together, drives just a nice positive momentum on our ability to drive margins in the next 3 years.
Warren, I think that's you at the back. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, it's Warren Ackerman here at Barclays. So on the vitamin category, some consumers think there's a lot of kind of dubious science around the category. They don't really believe that, you know, popping pills actually really aids their their health. What can Nestlé do from an R&D point of view with the money that you're spending on R&D to actually make the category more science-driven so that when consumers find it tough from a cost of living point of view, they don't see it as such a discretionary category? That's the first one. What can you actually add? What value can you add on R&D in the category? And the second one is, can these brands really travel? You know, I get that when you bought Bountiful, it was mainly a US business, and I get that Solgar is a brand that's in 50 countries. But other brands like Nature's Bounty, can that actually be a brand that's going to work in Europe, China? And if so, how do you go about doing that, and how quickly can you roll these brands out, given some of the medical barriers around regulation as well? Thank you.
So I'll let Anna take the internationalization of the brands to start with, and I will cover the R&D part.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, and it depends. So overall, we're very excited and very bullish on the opportunity to roll out these brands geographically. And to your point, we do need to understand there are a couple of components that we need to look at. First, you know, as Don described, we look at the different positioning of the brands and say, okay, you know, how does the portfolio fit based on the value proposition, the pricing, the channel, the consumer, the customer dynamics, competitive dynamics within the market, and the regulatory framework. So which are the products that we can actually roll out, and in what time? And then what is the right sequencing of these brands so that we make sure that we can have multiple brands to give us a stronger portfolio to compete. So Solgar, as you mentioned, is a very strong brand internationally. It's actually larger internationally than in the US. We're also seeing some of our other brands travel very well. So you saw a little bit about Vital Proteins. We're starting to see some success with Nature's Bounty in a couple of the markets where we've also rolled out. We have Noon in a couple of markets, and we're planning actually to roll out. There's a lot of excitement around Noon, a lot of excitement around Orgain. It's really kind of what we call internally an embarrassment of riches. We have so many great brands. We need to figure out the right sequencing and approach to go into the market and make sure that the multitude of brands allows us to be more competitive. And that's why we really need to look at the target consumer, the customer, the channel, and the claims that we can make. To your point, market by market, we do need to assess, you know, what can we say and what can the right formulation be, because you can't necessarily lift and shift an entire portfolio.
Yeah, and just to add on this, each market is very specific, so we don't necessarily plan to roll out every brand in every market. We look at the opportunities in each market. So for example, where you have a market that's more pharmacy driven versus mass retail, a brand like Solgar or pure encapsulation is more adequate. And we've rolled out very successfully pure encapsulation in Austria, in Germany, in Spain, in UK, and we plan to further expand this. So I think you know, each market, but it takes time. It takes time to build this portfolio across the world. And then on the R&D question, the hypothesis that we made back when we started the whole strategy on the vitamin, minerals, and supplements back in 2014 is that we could leverage the great know-how and capability of Nestlé in R&D. There is many discovery and technology that we can leverage for Nestlé, from Nestlé R&D, and that are not necessarily directly scalable into food and beverage, but that we can leverage into our in a portfolio like vitamin, minerals, and supplements. So that was the hypothesis, and it turns out to be absolutely true and positive. So for example, probiotics, we've been able to expand the probiotic portfolio in a big way, leveraging, for example, the manufacturing capability in probiotics that we are using from our infant nutrition business. The science, again, same example. But we see still many additional opportunities. So we invest significantly with the R&D into, for example, science in mitochondria, understanding further how you can impact people's aging process, what we call the cellular nutrition, and boosting the mitochondria in your body, who are responsible for 80% of your immune system. So this is part of the plan to continue to invest, bringing more science and educating both physicians, healthcare providers, as well as consumers about the benefit of what we have in the portfolio and some of the future innovations. But let's be clear, what we have in our portfolio are not pharmaceutical products, and we will never do clinical trial that are like a pharmaceutical product clinical trial. This is not the design of this category. On the other hand, we can leverage and create technology advancement and develop available data on specific ingredients, or if we feel the need to develop further evidence, then create that evidence.
We'll probably have time for 2 more questions, so please go ahead.
Thank you. Patrick Schwendimann, Zürcher Bank. If I remember well, a long time ago, probably over 10 years ago, it was mentioned that Nestlé Health Science could even have a 20% margin. Now you're aiming for 18%. Do you think that's still possible in the very long term to reach 20%, or has something changed?
Nothing has changed. We continue believing that we can drive further the margins above 20% level. Remember, this is underlying trading operating profit. This is not EBITDA. So some of you might be comparing with people reporting EBITDA in some of similar categories. So I just want to make sure this is clear. But in general, we see further potential for improvement. Yes.
Thank you.
And one final question, please go ahead.
Thanks. Tom Sykes from Deutsche Bank. 2, please. Just on medical nutrition, is pricing inflationary in medical nutrition, given that you said there were budgetary headwinds? And could you allude to what sort of level of pricing benefit that you see at the growth level within medical nutrition, please? And could you just clarify, please, on the consumer side, what manufacturing base you are going to be using to internationalize the business? Because I'm still slightly confused by the different comments of synergies, insourcing, using your own manufacturing capability internationally. Are you going to be using third-party manufacturers? That would be helpful, please.
So Anna, I think you can, yes.
Yeah, so as we mentioned during the presentation, you have different ranges, different payment models from fully reimbursed, partially to not reimbursed at all. In markets where it's reimbursed, then the reimbursements or the reimbursement levels are relatively fixed by the government, and then there is typically, I'll call it a negotiation or a discussion each year with the health authorities to discuss whether there's going to be any adjustment in the reimbursement levels. We also have tenders, which are contracts either at the health system. It could be with a government or a state or a province or a region, or it could be with a specific hospital system. And those tenders can be anywhere from 1 to 3 to 5 years. And typically, those are then fixed prices for those years. And as you know, there's a lot of pressure on healthcare spending. What we actually found during these last 2 years, because of the extraordinary inflation, in some cases we were able to go back in and to negotiate the pricing even within the tender by demonstrating the higher cost inputs that we had. So I would say that the medical nutrition business, the pricing isn't as impacted, or you're not able to adjust for inflation in the same way that you are in consumer pricing. But in some of the markets where it's controlled by the health authorities, they will adjust. So if I use Turkey as an example, they look at the inflation rate in the country, which, as you know, in Turkey is quite high, and then they will adjust the reimbursement rate. But it will differ market by market and tender by tender. But those are discussions that we need to have with the health authorities.
And regarding the manufacturing question you asked, I think to summarize, we basically have the capacity to insource. And typically what you will find is that in the consumer care segment, there is a lot of players that are basically using co-manufacturing footprint. When we make the acquisitions, often the companies that we acquire come with a fairly large part of their portfolio that is co-manufactured. With the acquisition of the Bountiful Company, we added a top-notch manufacturing capacity at Nestlé Health Science, and we now have the ability to bring and insource some of these co-manufacturing, get the savings, but also get top quality capability as we have in our manufacturing footprint. And this applies, obviously, shipping products from the US when it's a lightweight product like pills, it's fairly simple, and we do that. But we also, in cases in some countries where import taxes are very high, then we look also for local production, and that was part of my comment on some local regional M&A that we've done to add also this capability in some certain region of the world.